The silence that followed Elena's announcement lasted precisely 12 seconds. Ambassador Tralvek of the Vektai was the first to recover, his iridescent scales flaring with what humans had learned to recognize as agitation. Ambassador Reyes, surely this is not the position of your government? Perhaps there has been a mistranslation? His smooth voice carried perfectly through the consensus chamber's acoustic design. Elena stood her ground, her expression professionally neutral despite the growing tension. There is no mistranslation, Ambassador. Humanity has deliberated extensively and reached this decision unanimously. The Drasi representative, General Mokhtar, leaned forward, his armored exoskeleton clicking against the polished table. The consensus requires explanation before action. You cannot simply withdraw without presenting grievances for resolution. We have no grievances to present, Elena replied, gathering her notes into a thin portfolio. We simply choose to exercise our sovereign right to association. The Consensus Charter, Article 4, Section 12, explicitly permits withdrawal with 60 standard days' notice. Consider this formal notice. The chamber erupted into multiple conversations, some in languages her translator couldn't process quickly enough. Elena noticed the Mori representative, a being of crystalline structure who rarely spoke, silently observing her with multifaceted eyes that revealed nothing. High Arbiter Gento, the elderly Alari who had moderated consensus meetings for over 40 cycles, raised his luminescent appendages for order. Ambassador Reyes, while the Charter does indeed permit withdrawal, no species has invoked this right in 3 centuries. The disruption to ongoing cooperative projects alone would be. We have prepared comprehensive transition plans for all shared initiatives, Elena interrupted, nodding to her aide who transmitted data packets to the central consensus network. All human personnel will be replaced or withdrawn within the notice period. All resource commitments will be fulfilled before departure. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, optical sensors, and sensory organs of representatives from across the galaxy. Many had been colleagues, some even friends for years. Humanity thanks the consensus for welcoming us into galactic society. We have learned much. We wish you continued peace. With that, Elena and her delegation stood, in unison. The practiced movement, rehearsed extensively, conveyed absolute finality. As they turned to leave, Ambassador Lan, of the peaceful Lanari, rose trembling to her feet. Elena, she spoke, using the human's personal name against protocol, the Vektai ships in our outer system. You promised to help us investigate their presence. Elena paused briefly, her back still to the chamber. I recommend you raise that matter with the full consensus, Dara. They will surely address your concerns. The human delegation departed through the grand archway of the chamber, ignoring the growing commotion behind them. Outside, Elena's shoulders dropped slightly once they were alone in the private transport tube. That was harder than I anticipated, she admitted to her senior aide, Michael Chen. They still don't understand, Michael replied, checking his secure terminal as it received encrypted transmissions from Earth. Which is precisely the point. Phase 1 complete, confirmation from Security Council received. All human ships have initiated withdrawal protocols. Elena nodded, looking out at the gleaming spires of Axiom Prime, the supposed crown jewel of galactic cooperation. How long do we have? The models suggest 6 months before everything falls apart, Michael said quietly. Maybe less now that we've accelerated the timeline. And humanity will be safely behind our borders when it happens, Elena said, watching the magnificent city recede as their transport accelerated toward the orbital dock. Let's hope we're ready when it's time to return. Kenji Takeda stood on the observation deck of Defense Platform Sentinel-17, watching as the automated systems came online. The massive structure, positioned at a strategic point along the Sali demarcation line, represented technology humans had developed but never shared with their consensus partners. Final calibration complete, Commander, reported Lieutenant Santos through his earpiece. All 38 platforms are now operational. Kenji allowed himself a small smile. 3 weeks ahead of schedule, well done. His communications panel chimed with yet another incoming diplomatic request. This one from the Terran ambassador, a being whose species had worked closely with humans on medical research. For the 47th time that day, Kenji authorized the standard response. Your message has been received. The Human Security Council is unavailable for direct communication during this transition period. A flash of light in the distance caught his eye. A small fleet of Draci vessels approaching the boundary markers. They maintained position just outside human space, their scanning arrays obviously active. They're probing the defense network, observed Captain Lin, who had joined him on the deck. Third attempt this week. Let them look, Kenji replied. The outer layer is meant to be visible. Lin nodded in understanding. The visible defense platforms were impressive enough, but they were merely the first layer of a much more sophisticated protection system. The real deterrents remained hidden, their existence not even hinted at in any consensus technology exchange. Status report from Earth, Lin said, checking her secure tablet. Director Okafor requests your presence at tomorrow's Security Council briefing. Kenji's expression tightened. That's 2 days earlier than planned. Intelligence analysis has been revised. The timeline is accelerating. On Earth, Maya Okafor stood before the massive holographic display dominating the Security Council chamber. Representatives from each continent watched as she manipulated the data visualizations with practiced gestures. The HFY have increased production at their shipyards by 27% since our withdrawal announcement, she explained, highlighting several star systems with a sweep of her hand. More concerning, we've detected encrypted communications between supposedly adversarial HFY and Draci command structures. They're coordinating, stated the African Union representative. Just as we suspected. Precisely, Maya confirmed. The apparent tensions were largely theatrical. We've intercepted partial transmissions suggesting the Mori have provided both species with technological advantages unknown to the wider consensus. The council chair, an older woman with the bearing of someone who had navigated crises before, studied the data with narrowed eyes. And the Lannery? The Tellerans? Will they be targeted first? Maya's expression softened slightly. All evidence suggests yes. The Lanari control key resource nodes, despite their limited military, the Tellerans' medical knowledge makes them valuable, but vulnerable. Former allies we've now abandoned, murmured the European representative. Allies we cannot save within the consensus framework, the chair corrected firmly. Our withdrawal was never about abandonment. It was about gaining the freedom to act decisively when the moment comes. Maya shifted the display to show human space, a relatively small but densely developed region now enclosed by the demarcation line. Our industrial conversion is proceeding at 115% of projected rates. Civilian support remains strong at 73% approval. And the refugee corridor? Asked the South American representative. Proxima Station can accommodate the initial wave, Maya responded. Security protocols are in place to prevent infiltration. Humanitarian supplies are stockpiled. The chair nodded solemnly. Then we continue as planned. When the consensus fails, and it will fail, humanity must be ready not just to survive but to rebuild something better from its ashes. Dr. Sarah Chen winced as she watched the live feed from the Lannery homeworld. The HFY occupation forces had disabled the planet's orbital defense grid with suspicious ease, as if they had known the exact frequencies and protocols beforehand. The Lanari, a species known for their artistic achievements rather than military prowess, had surrendered within hours. Archive everything, she instructed her team at the cloaked observation post positioned just outside Lanari space. Particularly, the command frequencies the HFY are using. Her second-in-command, Dr. Alvarez, looked up from his monitoring station. The consensus emergency session has just adjourned. No action taken. Again. Sarah wasn't surprised. What was the vote? Deadlocked. The Mori and their client states abstained, claiming insufficient evidence of treaty violations. The observation post's alert system chimed as another report came in. This time, footage showed Draci warships launching precision strikes against HFY positions near the Terran border. The Draci public broadcast claimed they were defending galactic stability, But Sarah noticed their attack patterns carefully avoided critical HFY infrastructure. "They're putting on a show," she muttered, highlighting certain sections of the footage. "Look here and here. The Drasi strikes are hitting secondary targets. They're destroying already evacuated facilities." She compiled the latest data and transmitted it through the secure quantum channel to Earth. Within minutes, she received acknowledgement from Commander Jackson's fleet headquarters in orbit around Mars. "Chen, this confirms our suspicions," Jackson's message read. "The Drasi HFY conflict is coordinated. Continue monitoring and maintain stealth protocols." In the command center aboard the newly commissioned vessel UES Deterrent, Commander Jackson studied the tactical displays with his senior officers. The ship, nearly twice the size of anything humanity had fielded during their consensus membership, hummed with power systems that would have raised serious concerns among their former allies. "The pattern is clear," Jackson explained, highlighting multiple conflict zones across the galactic map. "The aggressors are systematically isolating species with valuable resources or knowledge. The Tellarans for their medical technology, the Lanari for their rare mineral deposits, the Alari for their transportation infrastructure." Captain Rodriguez, his tactical officer, frowned at the display. "And each targeted species reached out to us specifically before the attacks began, because they sensed something was wrong," Jackson replied. "Just as we did. The difference is we acted instead of hoping the consensus would save them." Their analysis was interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth. The first refugee ships had reached the Proxima Centauri checkpoint, carrying thousands of displaced Lanari civilians. Initial scans had detected embedded surveillance technology in some of the vessels. "Not unexpected," Jackson noted grimly. "The HFY would use refugees to gather intelligence." He turned to his communications officer. "Send word to Proxima Station. Full quarantine protocols for all incoming ships. Humanitarian aid proceeds as planned, but security screening at maximum intensity." As the command center staff implemented his orders, Jackson stared at the tactical display showing the spreading conflicts. The galaxy was fracturing precisely as humanity had predicted, perhaps even faster. He thought of the massive construction projects underway throughout human space, the training of specialized intervention forces, the development of technologies previously considered too aggressive for consensus approval. "We have less time than we thought," he told his officers quietly. "Accelerate all readiness timetables. Phase 2 may need to begin early." Chief Engineer Marcus Wong ran his hand along the gleaming hull of the prototype vessel. The metal felt warm, almost alive, as the quantum stabilization field hummed beneath its surface. What appeared as standard alloy to casual inspection was actually a complex matrix of materials never disclosed to the consensus. "Beautiful, isn't she?" asked Admiral Chen, joining him in the massive construction bay. "Hard to believe we conceived this design only 8 months ago." Marcus nodded, pride evident in his expression. "The consensus technology sharing protocols restrained us in ways we never fully appreciated until we stepped away. Their standardization requirements always seemed reasonable, but they effectively prevented certain avenues of research." A team of engineers passed by, carrying what looked like a standard shield generator but was in reality something far more advanced. The quantum phase adaptive shields could analyze incoming weapons fire and dynamically reconfigure to optimal defensive parameters within microseconds. "The Tellarand representative has requested a tour of our medical facilities on Proxima Station," Admiral Chen mentioned, checking her secure tablet. "Strategic Director Reyes believes we should grant it." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Showing our hand already?" Selectively, Chen clarified. "The Tellarans need to understand we're not just hiding. We're preparing. Their medical knowledge combined with our new defensive capabilities could save countless lives when full intervention begins." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the shipyard's central command. 3 more Deterrent-class vessels had passed final testing and were ready for crew assignment. That brought the total fleet to 17, still modest by consensus standards, but each vessel carried capabilities that would shock their former allies. On Earth, in the Strategic Planning Division of the Security Council headquarters, Reyes studied the latest intelligence reports. The Alari homeworld was now completely blockaded by Vecti customs inspection vessels. Independent trade had effectively ceased, creating food shortages in major population centers. Meanwhile, the Terran medical research facilities had been requisitioned by Drazi forces for security purposes. "They're not even pretending anymore," she told her senior advisors. "The facade of consensus cooperation is collapsing faster than our models predicted." Her chief of intelligence, a veteran analyst who had first identified the troubling patterns years ago, displayed the latest simulations. At current progression rates, the triumvirate will have control of 80% of critical resources within 3 standard months. "Then we accelerate," Reyes decided, authorizing a priority directive with her biometric signature. "Begin limited diplomatic engagement with targeted species. Focus on those with complementary capabilities. The Tellarans first, then the Alari." "What about the Lanari?" asked one of her advisors. "They've suffered the worst occupation." Reyes's expression hardened slightly. "The Lanari need immediate liberation, not diplomatic talks. Prepare a humanitarian intervention plan for Security Council approval. Test case for our new capabilities." Across human space, citizens watched news broadcasts of the galactic turmoil with growing resolve. Initial uncertainty about the withdrawal had given way to determination, as evidence mounted that their leaders had been right. Community centers buzzed with volunteers coordinating refugee support programs. University research labs worked around the clock developing technologies previously constrained by consensus protocols. In orbit around Jupiter, the Advanced Military Training Center, known simply as the Academy, was operating at triple capacity. Special intervention teams practiced coordinated operations using simulations based on real-time intelligence from observation posts. These weren't conquerors or invaders. They were being trained as surgical strike forces designed to liberate without causing civilian casualties. Humanity wasn't preparing for war. They were preparing for something more difficult, a peace that would need to be built from the ashes of a failed system. Admiral Hassan watched from the command deck of the UES Interventor as his tactical display showed the precise positions of the 6 human vessels now surrounding the Drazi blockade fleet. The element of surprise had been total. The quantum displacement drives had allowed them to materialize precisely where they intended without detection. "Drazi commander is responding to our hail," reported his communications officer, her fingers dancing across the adaptive interface. "Audio and visual. On screen," Hassan ordered calmly. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the armored visage of Drazi Fleet Commander Zaxtal. Despite his species' normally impassive exoskeletal features, Hassan could detect clear signs of shock. "This is a violation of sovereign space," the Drazi commander began, mandibles clicking in agitation. "The humans have no authority here." "We claim no authority," Hassan replied evenly. "We simply will not allow the starvation of civilian populations. Your vessels have 10 minutes to withdraw beyond the outer marker. Any ship remaining will be disabled." The Drazi commander's compound eyes narrowed. "The mighty humans return from hiding with threats? Your 6 vessels cannot match my battle group of 27. Hassan didn't bother responding to the provocation. 9 minutes, 40 seconds remaining. I suggest you use that time wisely." He ended the transmission with a gesture and turned to his tactical officer. "Status of civilian evacuation teams?" "Ready in deployment bays, Admiral." "Medical units are prepped for immediate ground insertion once the blockade is cleared." Hassan nodded, watching the countdown on his display. Intelligence had predicted an 87% probability that the Drazi would attack rather than withdraw. 3 minutes later, those predictions proved accurate as the Drazi vessels launched a coordinated barrage of plasma torpedoes. "Defensive systems engaging," reported his systems officer with professional detachment. "Adaptive shields responding." The human vessel's shields flared with brilliant blue energy as they absorbed the incoming fire. Not a single torpedo penetrated. The bridge crew maintained their focus, each member executing their role with precision born of intense training. "Target weapons and propulsion systems only," Hassan ordered. "Minimal crew casualties." The human response was devastatingly precise. Concentrated energy beams sliced through the Drazi vessel's offensive capabilities without breaching life support or crew quarters. Within 7 minutes, 18 Drazi ships hung powerless in space. The remaining vessels initiated emergency jumps away from the Terran system. "Blockade neutralized," announced the tactical officer. "Civilian evacuation. Teams deploying now." On the Terran surface, terrified civilians watched in awe as human shuttles descended through the atmosphere. Years of propaganda had told them humans were selfish cowards who had abandoned galactic society. Yet here they were, bringing medical, supplies, food, and protection against the Drazi occupation forces. Dr. Elena Vora, leading the medical relief team, approached the Terran elders who had gathered nervously at the landing zone. She carried no visible weapons, only diagnostic equipment and treatment kits. "We come to help," she said simply in the Terran language, having studied it during humanity's withdrawal period. "Your people need medical attention. Will you allow us to provide it?" The eldest Terran, her skin pale from illness induced by Drazi biological agents, studied the human doctor carefully. "Why now? Why return after abandoning the consensus?" Dr. Vora met her gaze steadily. "We never abandoned you. We simply needed freedom to act beyond consensus constraints. Today, we offer more than words and diplomatic resolutions. We offer real assistance." As similar scenes unfolded across multiple worlds, galactic communication networks exploded with reports of human intervention. The carefully cultivated narrative of human cowardice dissolved in the face of their decisive action. Ambassador Elena Reyes stood at the center of the newly constructed meeting chamber aboard Proxima Station. Representatives from 22 species arranged themselves in a circular pattern, symbolizing the equal standing that formed the foundation of this new coalition. Unlike the grand, ornate consensus chamber, with its hierarchical seating and ancient protocols, this space was designed for efficient communication and rapid decision-making. "The response coalition recognizes the delegate from Talaris," Elena said, nodding toward the willowy figure whose blue-tinged skin still showed signs of recovery from Drazi bioweapons. "Our medical authorities have completed analysis of the treatment protocols provided by human physicians," the Terran representative announced, her melodic voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "We have successfully synthesized the counteragents and can now produce enough to treat all affected populations. Furthermore, we offer to share this knowledge with any coalition member facing similar biological attacks." Murmurs of approval spread through the assembly. This was precisely the kind of practical cooperation the coalition was founded upon. "The Alari delegation acknowledges this generous offer," responded their representative, his luminescent appendages pulsing with emotion. "Our transport network has been restored to 60% capacity thanks to human tactical assistance. We can ensure distribution of these medical countermeasures to 17 systems within the next standard week." Elena watched the interactions with cautious optimism. In just 3 weeks, the response coalition had moved from concept to functioning reality. Species that had previously competed or merely coexisted were now integrating their unique strengths toward common goals. Her aide approached discreetly, passing her a secure data tablet. The latest intelligence report showed the aggressor's alliance was fracturing under pressure. The Vecti blamed the Drazi for insufficient military response to human interventions, while the Mori questioned both species' competence. Meanwhile, across disputed space, Commander Jackson coordinated a precision strike against the largest Vecti weapons manufacturing facility. Unlike traditional military operations, this mission involved no orbital bombardment or mass assault. Instead, specially trained teams inserted covertly, disabled critical systems, and extracted without casualties. "Target neutralized," reported team leader Captain Sonia Petrov as her squad returned to their stealth transport. "Production capacity reduced by 70%. All personnel evacuated before system shutdown, as ordered." Jackson acknowledged the report with satisfaction. "Well executed. Proceed to Extraction Point Alpha." He updated the strategic overview displayed in his command center. Across the galactic map, similar operations were systematically degrading the aggressor's capacity to wage war without engaging in traditional battles. Human vessels appeared, struck with surgical precision, and vanished before effective countermeasures could be deployed. "We've received another request," his communications officer informed him. "The Neridian Collective wishes to join the coalition. They've been observing our operations against Vecti supply lines through their territory." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "Forward their request to Director Reyes. Their navigational expertise would be valuable if they're genuine." Back at Proxima Station, Elena concluded the coalition meeting with announcements of new protective measures for vulnerable civilian populations. As the chamber cleared, she met privately with the Terran representative. "We've intercepted communications, suggesting the Mori are planning something significant," Elena confided. "Their public neutrality is merely cover for deeper involvement." The Terran's multifaceted eyes blinked with concern. "We suspected as much. Our scientists have noticed unusual energy signatures from Mori observation platforms near our secondary colonies. The coalition must prepare for their eventual move," Elena stated. "When they show their true capabilities, we need to be ready." Lieutenant Amara Wright worked methodically through the encrypted files extracted from the Mori data core. The crystalline storage device, recovered during a precision raid on a hidden communication relay, had initially resisted standard decryption methods. Only by applying techniques developed during humanity's isolation period had her team managed to access its contents. "Director, you need to see this immediately," she called, her voice steady despite the implications of what she'd discovered. Strategic. Director Reyes joined her at the secure terminal, expression grave as she reviewed the decoded transmissions. The files contained detailed surveillance of Earth dating back nearly 2 centuries, long before official first contact with the consensus. "They were watching us before we even developed fusion technology," Amara explained, highlighting key sections. "This report specifically mentions human adaptive problem-solving as a potential destabilizing influence on galactic order." Reyes studied the data with growing concern. "These assessment matrices, they're evaluating multiple species for threat potential, cross-reference with known consensus protocols." Amara's fingers moved rapidly across the interface. The correlation was unmistakable. Many consensus regulations and standards that had seemed benign now revealed their true purpose. Technology sharing agreements had systematically directed developing species away from certain research paths. Cultural exchange programs had subtly emphasized collective deference over innovation. "It was all designed to limit us," Reyes breathed, the full scope of the deception becoming clear. Not just humans, any species with potential to challenge the established powers. The terminal chimed as another layer of encryption yielded to their analysis. A series of communication records between Vecti, Drasi, and Mori leadership appeared, confirming their suspicions. The supposed rivals had been coordinating for decades, staging controlled conflicts that never threatened their collective interests while dividing resources among themselves. "This changes everything," Reyes said, initiating a secure transmission to the Security Council. "We need to share this with our coalition partners immediately." At Proxima Station, representatives of the Response Coalition gathered in the secure chamber to view the evidence. The Terran delegation's normally composed demeanor gave way to visible distress as they witnessed proof of how their medical research had been systematically suppressed. The Alari representative's bioluminescence flared with an intensity that indicated profound emotional response. "The consensus protocol on medical technology transfer," the lead Terran said softly. "It always required us to modify our treatments to be compatible with standard physiology templates. We assumed it was for safety. In reality, it prevented your most revolutionary techniques from being developed," completed Elena. "Just as the standardized drive specifications prevented humans from exploring quantum displacement technology." The Alari representative's appendages trembled slightly. "Our transportation network designs were consistently directed toward models that could be easily monitored and controlled." As the implications spread through the coalition, a new sense of shared purpose emerged. They had not just been deceived, they had been deliberately stunted, their unique potentials hampered to maintain a false peace that primarily benefited 3 dominant powers. In her private quarters later, Amara continued analyzing the recovered data. One file particularly disturbed her, a contingency plan labeled Human Containment Scenario. It detailed the systematic dismantling of human civilization should it ever break free of the established constraints. The most chilling aspect was its authorization date, the very day humanity announced its withdrawal from the consensus. They were ready to destroy us if isolation didn't weaken us first, she realized, sending an urgent alert to Reyes. The Triumvirate never expected us to return stronger. They expected us to collapse without consensus support. The Grand Chamber. On Axiom Prime had been redesigned, its architecture now reflecting the principles of the new interstellar charter. Gone were the ornate hierarchical platforms that had subtly reinforced power imbalances. Instead, representatives from 67 species gathered in concentric circles with open pathways between each section to encourage movement and interaction. Admiral Hassan watched as Strategic Director Reyes activated the detailed holographics display showing the Coalition's vision for galactic governance. After a year of precise interventions, targeted liberations, and the systematic dismantling of the Triumvirate's war machine, this moment represented not victory, but beginning. The charter before you today was crafted with input from every member species, Reyes explained, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Unlike the consensus, it acknowledges our differences as strengths rather than inconveniences to be managed. A Terran representative rose, her once frail form now restored to health. The Medical Sciences Council provision ensures no species will again be prevented from developing treatments suited to their unique biology. Knowledge will flow freely, without artificial constraints. And the Technological Innovation Protocols, added the Alari delegate, explicitly prohibit any standardization requirement that limits development paths. Collaboration will be genuinely cooperative, not covertly restrictive. Hassan observed, the former Triumvirate representatives now stripped of their previous authority. The HFY delegation, reduced to observer status until they met rehabilitation requirements, watched with mandibles tightly closed. The Drasi representatives, under similar probation, maintained rigid postures that betrayed their discomfort. The Mori delegation had been reduced to a single representative. Their influence dramatically diminished after the exposure of their extensive manipulation network. Most importantly, Reyes continued, highlighting a specific section of the charter, membership in this coalition is always voluntary. Any species may withdraw without penalty if they find our shared path no longer aligns with their values. However, transparency requirements ensure such decisions cannot mask hostile intentions. The vote proceeded quickly, with overwhelming support for the new charter. As celebrations began, Hassan received a secure communication from Earth. He excused himself, finding a private alcove to review the message from the Security Council chair. Operation Clear Vision officially concluded. The message read, First Contact Protocol Threat Assessment neutralized. You are authorized to reveal the final element of human strategic planning. Hassan returned to find Reyes concluding her formal remarks. With a subtle gesture, he indicated he needed to speak. She nodded, yielding the central position. There is one more truth that must be shared today, Hassan announced, his voice solemn. When humanity encountered the consensus, our leaders implemented what we call the First Contact Protocol, a comprehensive assessment of potential existential threats. That assessment identified concerning patterns long before we had concrete evidence. A murmur spread through the gathering as he continued. Our withdrawal was not a spontaneous decision, but the culmination of decades of careful observation and planning. We turned our backs on the consensus not in fear or selfishness, but as a strategic necessity to develop the capabilities needed to address these threats. He paused, looking around the chamber. We share this now not to claim credit or superiority, but because the new order we build together must be founded on complete honesty. Humanity is not your savior. We are your partners. We faced a choice between comfortable deception and difficult truth. We chose truth, even when it required us to stand alone. As his words settled across the chamber, representatives from dozens of worlds rose in silent acknowledgement. The era of false peace had truly ended. What followed would be harder, messier, and infinitely more real.